Hello, and welcome back to day 9 of 100 Days of Clarity. And so we're going to jump right back into the lesson that we didn't finish off last time, in which we're reviewing optionals. Again, the goal of these videos is usually to get to 10 to 15 minutes because as they get more and more complicated, you're going to have to follow along programming. And that, makes these 10 to 15 videos last up to 30, 45 minutes, even an hour if you're following along. And so for that case, I'm trying to keep these between the 10 to 15 minute range. The last one, we went just a bit over. We were right on the edge of it. And we didn't get to the end before I covered two functions that are almost always used with optionals or that are very effective and very powerful to use with optionals. And we're going to review them today. The two functions are called isSum, so is is dash SOME, and is none, is and dash NONE. As the name implies, both of these functions are used in conjunction with optionals when we want to validate or check that either a value is there or it isn't there. So without much talking, let's go ahead, jump back right into the code, Clarity Basics 2, and let's go ahead. So we're going to go to the bottom of the file, press enter. And for the common section, day 9, and let's just call this optionals part 2. Okay. And so first and foremost, we're going to give an example of the isSum function by writing a define read only that takes in an optional number. So define read only, and let's call this isSum because that's the function we're going to use, isSum example. And then again, most of the examples we're going to use moving forward for functions, they're going to use parameters, so let's get in the habit of using them. Again, the parameters go inside of the parentheses of where the function name is held. So the function name is isSum example. Right after it, we can write, again, the variable name, so we're going to call this num, and then space the variable type. We want this to be a uint, but not just a normal uint, we want it to be an optional. So we have to tell Clarity, hey, this is an optional. Perfect. Then for our body, enter, indent, and all we're going to do is call the isSum function. And as you can see, if I type that in, the only thing on the right is the optional that we need to provide as an input to this function. And so here, all we're going to do is pass down the parameter, which we've named num. So call this num. We save. We see there are no errors. And we go back to the terminal. And we can type in clarinet console again. We see everything pops up. And we can see here from our map chart or from our map diagrams that we see isSum example here. So let's go ahead and try calling that. So make sure you're in .clarity basics 2. And then let's call it, we're calling isSum example. And first, let's test what happens when we do pass in a value. And again, as we reviewed last video, if you want to pass in a parameter into a function, you do it after the function name here. And since we're not doing just a normal integer, which will fail, we need to do an optional. So again, we are certainly providing a value. So we need to do sum u10. Close parentheses. And now we are passing that optional. If we pass this in and we have a function isSum, and again, both the isSum and the isNone functions, all they would do is return a Boolean. They tell us for the isSum, if there is some value in there, true. If it's none, false. IsNone is the inverse. If there is no value in there, true. If there's some value in there, false. So with this function that we have, isSum num, and we're passing an optional of sum u10, we know that this is going to return true. And indeed it does. So now let's do up arrow though, and now we're going to do something interesting. Delete sum u10 and just type in none as a parameter. Now if we run this, as you expect, isSum is going to return false. And indeed it does. So that being said, let's go back to our IDE. All we're going to do is write the inverse of an isSum example. So just go ahead, copy paste, write in is none and for the function name, and then write in is none for the actual function in the body as well. I'm going to go ahead and do it quickly, but feel free to follow along. Okay, is none example is none. Awesome. Go back to clarinet console, and all we're going to do is run those two examples again. So we hammer this lesson in. Make sure in the function call you're actually calling is none example and not the same is sum. And again, first we want to make sure we have a value of true. We're checking is none, so just pass in none as a parameter. It is indeed true. We can pass in optional u10, and we got some error. Oh, sorry, it's because it should have been sum u10. Optional is how we define that this is an optional. Sum u10 does return false. Awesome. So that's actually the only two functions I wanted to show today to keep it simple. Let's go ahead and end this with a little bit of a complicated function. What we're going to do is we're going to take the params optional function that we have on line 13, and we're just going to do a giant AND operator in the body, and we're going to make sure that everything being passed exists, or everything being passed, or all parameters has sum. So let's go ahead, copy paste 13 and just call it from params optional and just call it AND. Every parameter we can leave it as there. We want to see all three of them. And for the body, again, what we're going to do is AND. And we know we're going to have at least 3 inputs here. So let's make this easy for our eyes. Press enter, enter, and then indent so that we know each input that this AND statement is going to check. And just go through them one at a time. So first is sum num. And again, num is the first parameter, the first input, the first argument. Okay, we're going to do this for all of them. So is sum string, and then is sum boolean. Okay, and as you see, Clarity isn't yelling this at us. This function is completely valid. And again, just with this function and this AND statement, we can now check, hey, do all of these values have something in them? Or again, if we wanted to test another use case and just say, hey, does at least one input parameter have some value? Then we would change the AND to an OR. And so let's go ahead, just run this function, and we'll call it a day. So clarinet console, we do indeed see params optional AND is there. So let's go ahead and call that function. Params optional AND. Okay, and first, let's just make sure that the AND is correctly working by failing and providing one none. So let's do none, then the string, so sum high, then the boolean sum true. And again, make sure you have the parentheses for all those optionals. And if you press enter here again, we provided the first isSum is none, and this is an AND statement, so all of this should return false. And something happened there, which again, I told you guys, be careful with the parentheses. Let me check here. Okay, sum is example. Sorry, I'm gonna have to rewrite that. Or actually, I'm gonna copy paste here. Contract call clarity basics 2 params optional and we have none, then sum high, then sum true. Okay, we're going to go ahead and try this, writing this out one more time manually, see if we can see what we're doing wrong. So contract call. Oh, I actually think there might be something wrong with the terminal here. So contract dash call question mark. The name of the contract dot clarity basics 2. The name of the function params optional and first, let's just make sure this is working by providing none, none, none. This should, obviously, everything is going to be none, so it should return false. Okay, cool. At least the function's working. And again, so this is how you debug, right? A lot of the time, like, the error messages, you might not even know what they mean. And so when it comes to debugging, you just want to go back and test one individual thing at a time to see where you're going wrong. So right now, let's go ahead and just change the first input, which should be a number. We're going to provide sum u10, which we know we've done this multiple times. Okay, that worked. Second parameter, sum high. Okay, and we see, okay, I'm missing, so I was actually missing a quotation in that one. Okay, so high. Okay, and we see that we return false, and now we should be able to just do sum true. And finally, we see that once we provided some parameter to all three parameters, all three arguments, the AND statement did return true. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call it a day here. Again, I apologize for the slowness at the end, but that's why I don't want to edit these parts out. It's critical that you run into these errors, but don't get discouraged. Just figure out how to work backwards from what you last know was working 100%. Okay, well, thank you for your time, and we will see you tomorrow on day 10.